Good morning, fourth graders. This is Miss Ferguson. It is Tuesday, March 24th. Our mini lesson today is going to be on summarizing. I know that's something that we have worked on a lot. We even have a chart paper poster in our classroom on how to write an effective summary. And it's something that we will always have to do in ELA. So it's a good time to revisit this and go over what is needed to make a good summary. So today we'll be working with some fables to help us. What is a summary? I'm sure this is something you can all answer, but a summary is a brief retelling of a story. And think about what it means to be brief. Brief is short. What's in a good summary? If you're reading a piece of literature, you want your main characters. The setting. What did they want? What was their goal or what was their motivation? What were they trying to achieve? What got in their way? What was the obstacle? What was the problem in the story? And what did they do to overcome it? Now, obviously, a summary of a piece of literature is going to be different than a summary of nonfiction text. So we're talking about writing a summary today of pieces of literature. So think of the book you're currently reading for independent reading, or think about your Nancy Drew book that we are reading as well. What was the outcome? So how did the story end up? What happened after they worked through their obstacles and made it to their goal, or maybe they didn't make it to their goal. What happened? We're going to work with a simple fable. So we're going to try something short and not too complicated to try to apply this. The dog and his shadow. A dog, to whom the butcher had thrown a bone, was hurrying home with his prize as fast as he could go. As he crossed a narrow footbridge, he happened to look down and saw himself reflected in the quiet water, as if in a mirror. But the greedy dog thought he saw a real dog carrying a bone, much bigger than his own. If he had stopped to think, he would have known better. But instead of thinking, he dropped his bone and sprang at the dog in the river, only to find himself swimming for dear life to reach the shore. At last he managed to scramble out, and as he stood sadly thinking about the good bone he had lost, he realized what a stupid dog he had been. So, when we're writing a summary, these are some of the things that we want to think about, and this table is going to help us with writing our summary. First of all, who was the main character? Well, it was the dog. Where was he? He was on the bridge. What was the goal? He was trying to take his bone home. What was the obstacle? Well, he saw a bigger bone in his reflection. What steps did he take to make his goal? He opened his mouth to grab the other bone and dropped his bone. What was the outcome? What happened? He had no bone. Using this, we can summarize or retell the story briefly. Again, remember we talk about how a summary is brief. It's not a complete retell of our story. Summary is brief. A dog was crossing a bridge. He wanted to carry his bone home. Sorry, technology. There we go. He saw a bigger bone in his reflection. He opened his mouth to grab the other bone and dropped his bone. The dog had no bone. How can we improve our writing? A dog was crossing a bridge. He wanted to carry his bone home. He saw a bigger bone in his reflection. He opened his mouth to grab the other bone and dropped his bone. The dog had no bone. Looking at this paragraph, how could we make this a better paragraph? First of all, let's combine some of the sentences that we have written. Remember that part of being a good reader and writer is paying attention to what we write and being able to evaluate our own work. So instead, we could say a dog was carrying his bone home across a bridge. It helps us to combine some of these sentences. It makes our writing make more sense and also is more efficient for us. Let's think about our transitional phrases. So looking at our paragraph, seeing what we wrote, and seeing how can we make it even better. So when we said a dog was carrying his bone home across a bridge, we should add when he looked into the water that he saw a bigger bone in his reflection. It makes it even clearer for the person reading our work. We can also add more details. Even though a summary is brief, having a little more detail is going to make it clearer for our reader and more interesting. So a dog was carrying his bone home across a bridge. When he looked into the water, he saw a bigger bone in his reflection. He opened his mouth to grab the other bone and dropped his bone. The dog had no bone. Something we could have added is that he dropped his bone in the river. Makes it clearer to whoever's reading our summary that that's what happened. And instead of saying the dog had no bone, we could leave it at that. If he dropped his bone in the river, it's clear that he wouldn't have his bone. So for the dog and his shadow, our summary would be that a dog was carrying his bone home across a bridge. When he looked into the water, he saw a bigger bone in his reflection. He opened his mouth to grab the other bone and dropped his bone in the river. He tried swimming after it, but his bone was lost, and he had none. So it adds details and more information to the initial summary we had written. We know who our character was, what he was trying to do, and what happened that kept him from achieving this goal. And it gives us a clear picture of what happened to the bone and to the dog. Notice that our summary is brief, so it's not long, but it's clear. By reading this short paragraph summary, we know what happened and why. Let's try some practice. We're going to try summarizing a story on our own. You're going to read the story, so you use the independent reading book or Nancy Drew book that you are currently reading for class, and write down the important details on a piece of paper. We're going to practice using some short passages before you go on to do some yourself. The Fox and the Grapes. A fox one day spied a beautiful bunch of ripe grapes hanging from a vine trained along the branches of a tree. The grapes seemed ready to burst with juice, and the fox's mouth watered as he gazed longingly at them. The bunch hung from a high branch, and the fox had to jump for it. The first time he jumped, he missed it by a long way. So he walked off a short distance and took a running leap at it. only to fall short once more. Again and again he tried, but in vain. Now he sat down and looked at the grapes in disgust. "What a fool I am," he said. "Here I am wearing myself out to get a bunch of sour grapes that are not worth gaping for." And off he walked very, very scornfully. So let's take a look at our chart again. Who is our character? The fox. Where was he? He was at the tree that had a grapevine. What was his goal? What was he trying to achieve? He was trying to get the grapes. The obstacle, the grapes were too high. What did he do? He jumped and jumped, but he could not reach the grapes. What happened? What was the outcome? He left and said that the grapes were sour. What I want you to do now is on a piece of loose leaf paper, I want you to write your own summary of the fox and the grapes. So act like you're writing a summary for someone who has not read or seen this story and give a brief summary of what happened in that passage. You can improve your own writing by taking these steps. Combine related sentences so that you're not saying things that you don't need to say. Add any connecting words or transitional phrase, excuse me, transitional phrases to make this clearer. Make sure that you add your important details. So fourth grade, this is the end of our lesson on summarizing. This is a short mini lesson. You need to write your summary of the story about the fox, and you need to read your independent reading book that you've been reading daily and for at least 35 minutes. And you need to make sure that you write down a summary of the chapter or chapters that you have read today. And those are things that I will be collecting from you. So I hope you're doing well. I miss you very much. And if you need anything, make sure that you or your mom and dad message me, and I will be talking to all of you soon. Have a great day.